Hi, welcome to your weekly energy overview discussion. Forgive me because I am a little bit of a mess today as I got very little sleep last night due to a work event that had me awake until almost 5 o'clock this morning, and then I was awake at 9 and I'm tired. And I just ate a bunch of nuts because I was like, I need some sustenance before I come on and record this. And now I have nuts in my teeth. Fascinating stuff, right? Anyway, we're going to get right into discussing Saturn squaring the Sun, which was at its pinnacle yesterday, the 30th of October. And now that we've kind of worked our way through that energy, I think it's clearer to us what it actually represents. What was a squeeze that you went through as a result of this? For me, there was a maturation in all of it from a perspective of self-perception, identity, self-empowerment, the limitations of self-empowerment, and accepting the limitations of empowerment as integral to my life journey. So for me, I'd always put myself in the position where I couldn't shine as a secondary character in the grand scheme of the narrative of not just my life, but life as it is perceived from my vantage point, including other people. So as a result of that, I always felt like a failure because I would very often find myself in a support role, the limitation. But then coming into an understanding that, in fact, I shine in that supporting role, and that there is as much beauty and grace and victory and validation in playing the ingenue as there is being the lead actor in our lives, right? I mean, of course, we're always the lead actor in our own lives, but sometimes there's more to be learned and more to be gained by learning through somebody else's path, journey, experience, knowledge, wisdom. So for me, Saturn squaring the Sun has been all about how my identity can adapt to that in a very empowered, but at the same time limiting support role, professionally speaking, and then peripherally that then becomes a part of the narrative with other people in my life. Sorry, I really can't put sentences together clearly, as you can see. Other people in my life on a social level, whatever that may be. And that dance becomes more graceful and smoother as I become more understanding of the power that comes from within, as opposed to it needing to be defined in a linear sense externally. That is how I have experienced this very trying aspect. And it wasn't a conscious journey. It wasn't something that I could pinpoint as I was experiencing it. The squeeze was clear, but I didn't really understand what the outcome would be. And it really is required in order for me to move forward on the journey that the universe is offering me to move forward on. Basically, it's like understanding. It's the opposite of the Wizard of Oz. It's not about revealing the person behind the mask or the curtain. It's understanding that in going behind a curtain into the background, sometimes we can be a better agent of change and improvement and betterment and a light worker. And again, that makes sense because we've talked so much about all this internal processing that we've focused on astrologically in recent months, years even, but particularly in the last couple of months in relation to what we're talking about now. And the requirement then to come out into the world and reintegrate, Libra really is that bridge, stepping out from within into the outside world. Scorpio then naturally takes us into the pull in the outside world of the inner workings, the mystical, the unknowable. The concepts surrounding those things, whether that be mortality, transcendence, love and sensuality and sexuality, and how they're all interwoven and how they have no value without each other. That's not right. From a sexual perspective, that is, I'm speaking. Obviously, love doesn't require a sexual dynamic. There are many other types of love, but in that particular realm, this is a scorpionic energy. So, it's understanding our limits and understanding that limits are a form of power. And actually all of our cards will explain that to us, and we shall see that. Of course, I'm speaking on this not consciously as a summary of the cards in front of us, but because that is the message, and so it's all kind of conjoining right now. What else do we have? Well, we have the new moon in Scorpio coming up, so that's why we were segueing into the Scorpio energy, because the new moon sets the tone and gives us the initiation into how Scorpio energy will manifest for us. So pay close attention to what's going on in your life around this new moon to understand the themes that you will consciously and subconsciously explore as we go through these 3 decans of Scorpio. Where are we at right now? Well, we are still in the first, but we will soon be moving into the second this week. So that is the understanding with Saturn squaring the Sun, all of that internal conflict surrounding restrictions, limitations, etc. And the second decan gives us the and of course finding the empowerment in those restrictions comes from spirit and from our spirituality, right? It's like that's where we temper that, because when I'm talking about restrictions and limitations, I'm of course talking in a worldly sense. So then the next decan brings us into the realm of externalization of that, how that does externalize. So if there are harsh angles, which there will be a few squares to come, Mercury squaring Pluto, for example. That is the death of a type of way of communicating, a way of how the way we feel about ourselves and life manifests through our communication. There's a good example of something that shifts in this second decan, underwritten by Scorpio. And of course, all of this can bring a certain edge of darkness and well, it's not so much darkness as it is unexplored, so therefore it's more that there's the potentiality for fear to seep into that exploratory process. We have to harness all of the energetic work that we have done on ourselves that allows us to transcend that fear and the apprehension of darkness, of the things that we perhaps rather not look at head on in ourselves. I'm not talking about, I mean, yes, it manifests then in devil energy and, avoidance, conspiracy, personal conspiracy, dissociation, all of these aspects are the way that they can manifest externally. So we've already done the inner work. We might not be aware of how much inner work we've done, but it is time now, not consciously, but just energetically, for those things to be explored in our day-to-day life. And of course that brings up the aftermath of a Saturn square, because it shows us, the light has been shone on where the limitations are, where the restrictions are, where we will no longer be X, Y, Z, where we will no longer have the opportunity to experience X, Y, Z, where we have chosen out of self-love no longer to do X, Y, Z. So a lot of that is psychological. And as you would know if you journal or if you've been in therapy, you can write or talk for hours about your problems, but the exercise of writing or therapy is for you to work through those things, explore the emotion, explore the context, and then move through it. Integration and transcendence are essentially one of the same thing in matters of the mind, right? And the devil energy is the avoidance, void, of the empty part that we are afraid to fill because we're holding on to an illusion of something that is not really there other than as a construct in order to protect ourselves from the anticipated darkness or exposure, ironically. Anyway, I'm getting very deep there. So, Venus is also in Sagittarius, and Venus in Sagittarius can also be a little bit challenging in the sense that in Sagittarius, Venus can feel not so much disempowered, but in a place of self-doubt. So there can be an element of, self-confidence crisis around our emotional state and around how we relate to other people emotionally. And that in turn can also manifest as avoidance. And again, a lot of that comes down to embracing limitation too. Like, can you see yourself in the context of your limitations, but also find your beauty in that? Because everybody has them, I mean, yes, we live in a world that's full of ridiculous constructs of elevating illusions of perfection, which are always extremely uh, suspect, in the sense that they're very superficial and they're curated in a way that, they really are like a house of cards. Because the reality is, if you take away one aspect of that illusion, you quickly end up seeing that you have a pile of horse shit in front of you, with that kind of a superficial approach to what perfection is. Usually it's an aesthetic, surface level definition in the culture in which we all live, because we live in a consumer-based culture, right? So, we've disempowered ourselves further into living in the illusion of need created by constructs that, if we just shifted the paradigm the slightest bit, would all collapse. In fact, the supply chain crisis in the world that we're now seeing, that's causing inflation and hyperinflation on many levels, is a part of the crumbling of that. The veil being lifted, the curtain being drawn back, and exposing the fragility of those who are allegedly in control of the narrative of the world in which we live. So again, these are all closely related to Scorpio. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is, you can have Venus in Sagittarius, and Venus in Sagittarius taking place during Scorpio season is going to be underwritten by Scorpionic energy. And so when you understand Scorpionic energy, which is not the easiest energy to understand, it almost requires a level of abstraction in your mind, or certainly a deep investment in the undescribable. All of this comes together anyway. You understand the flavor of it when you it's almost like an equation. You take, well, unless you know math, I'm not the person to explain that to you, but because I'm a dilettante with those types of things, I just have memories of what that all was like. So anyway, I'm not going to ramble any further, certainly not about algebra. That's the last thing I want to talk about right now, given my current state of mind. So, should we get into the cards? Probably wise, right? What is it, 18 minutes of astrological and existential rambling? Well, here's a good place to start when you're exploring limitations. Self-love. Is there a number on that card? Oh, here it is. Your inner child is an aspect of the self, reminiscent of all that you have learned and experienced. Free, spontaneous, creative, and full of wonder, your inner child longs to be in a state of joy, but also requires nurturing, attention, and constant reassurance. Your inner child feels these extremes of emotion because they lack understanding of why particular circumstances have occurred. You can shift long-standing emotional patterns by working with your inner self, resolve problems, trauma and issues that you have found challenging and difficult to address. While you may have grown up quickly or had a limited childhood, absent of opportunities and experiences, the inner child is an aspect of you that requires love and attention even as an adult. Emotions are powerful. Like children, adults manipulate, rebel, throw tantrums, and can also put on a brave face for the sake of others. To create a symbiotic relationship, you, the parent, self-parent, and your inner child must work in agreement of security, safety, acceptance, and surety. Acknowledging that you have been wounded is the first step in shifting your mindset. Self-love is essential right now as there is a child within you needing parental help and advice, grieving for the past and circumstances that we did not understand at the time, no matter how old you were, is now necessary. Helplessness, confusion, or feeling overwhelmed can trigger childlike behavior such as tantrums, manipulation, and rebellion in an attempt to get what you want. Take the time to be playful and curious. Be courageous and learn the power of no. It will shield you from pushy people seeking to compromise your values and integrity. If you were to see the little you now, what sage advice would you give, knowing what you know today? Affirmation: I nurture the child within me. I am complete, whole, and secure. I am safe. And so let's answer that question. For myself, what kept coming up for me in this, and I do not mean this in any form of denigration to my parents in speaking on this, although I'm sure it would be received that way. I come from a background where, for whatever reason, my parents felt the need in their adulthood to move on from their own transgressions without much exploratory work. And subsequently, that meant shutting down to the exploration of my own trauma, which in turn meant that I had to cut myself off from that, because it's unhealthy to live an unexamined life. And I understand too how inconvenient that is to people when they've decided to settle into comfort and avoidance, because comfort is usually an avoidance of some sort. Again, that's other people's prerogatives, not my own. It's not the way that I function, and so it makes it incompatible. But I had to learn to parent myself, and I learned it in a very, very harsh arc of experiences. And I held on to an illusion, a construct for the longest time, holding space for a notion of a family that didn't exist, because I had been brainwashed into thinking that that's what life was all about, which was the greatest hypocrisy that I experienced from my own family, which was that we had all of these draconian impositions of values and traditions that subsequently my own parents did not honor at all, and first of all broke our family apart as a result of their own incapacity to transcend their personal issues, and then failed to nurture their children in that process. Again, these are human beings. Human beings all have shortcomings, so we all have to experience our limitations in order to transcend, and sometimes that comes under great duress. Sometimes it comes in the flow of life. Sometimes it comes subconsciously without people realizing, depending on their level of intellect. And sometimes it just doesn't happen in this lifetime, and that just means that it's okay. It will be revisited on the next cycle, But I look at the process of soul evolution in a human body as being a challenge to work through trauma and um, darkness to move into light. And you cannot do that without exploring under every stone and every page and every leaf and whatever other analogy one could come up with. So that is what self-love is. And it's an exercise, and it's something that requires perpetual work. There is never an end to that work. So if you live under the illusion that you reach some point where you can retire from work on yourself, you're probably in for a rude awakening at some point, and if you escape that rude awakening in this lifetime and you die and then you move on, like to whatever is unknowable to us in human form, I would have a strong inkling of well, it's an intuitive sentiment that you're going to experience it twice as much, or maybe 3 times as much, or however many times you've been in the cycle of trying to learn the same lesson. So, anyway, hopefully in that self-love message, we talk about that all the time, but it was in a more succinct and perhaps even almost more lesson-like form. That information really does explain just how important that is as the basis of, the canvas of our life, right? So, on that note, because we were talking about limitations, and this is very much in alignment with the resolve that would come from the Saturn squaring the Sun that we just experienced, our Sufi Wisdom Oracle card of the week is Limitation is Power. Lean into your limitations. Don't look for water, become thirsty. Necessity develops organs of perception. Oh man, increase your necessity so that you may increase your perception. Right? I mean, that took a moment for me to wrap my head around. Rumi. Do you have a great idea that you have placed on the back burner just because you thought it required resources outside of your reach? Well, the great mystic Rumi is talking to you. He wants you to realize that the flaring fire of inspiration is mostly sparked through limitation. Which is a challenge, right? Necessity provides incentive, which is the mother of all inventions. It only takes love and extended faith to make it happen. The oracle is guiding you to embrace your new ideas creatively, to capture on them through your... No, sorry, I really have problems today. To capitalize on them through your innovative capability. View them as opportunities rather than problems, and you will marvel at the brilliance which can evolve from limitation. Limitation is the fertile ground in which the seeds of creativity sprout and grow. Challenges, when approached positively, become helpful in getting creative juices flowing. Remember, dear one, to be ready to adapt. Be flexible. Prepare to bend and make shifts as it becomes necessary. When unexpected things happen, do not see them as obstacles to your creativity. Respond with imagination and new ways of looking at them that becomes part of the creation itself. Improvise within the conditions and create with what you are given. The more you become aware of this process, the more you can affect what happens. And I just want to say that I get a very strong Page of Swords energy in that rather than even speaking of limitation, it's about remaining teachable. The limit is not having the knowledge, right? And once you gain the knowledge, the limitation is transcended. And there was a very Uranus energy and all of that too, about embracing the unexpected, because we do have a lot of that in, we have Taurus, Uranus in Taurus, we have, the Saturn squaring Uranus triple square this year. Like, we have another one coming up on December 24th. Very, very intense in terms of the way that our world gets shifted forward through the unexpected, through the electricity that resides in everything that can sometimes become more alive, you know, more of a, you know, a conduit. Anyway, here's the mantra from that. I am determined to lean into what seems to be a limitation and allow it to create a shift in the way I perceive the experience. I realize my limitations will also allow me greater freedom of spirit and soul, which is the precious gift of divine grace. So that is exactly what we were talking about with the Saturn squaring the Sun energy. Essentially, we just got the description in that card of the outcome. Our spirit animal oracle card of the week, Lizard Spirit, dream the world into being. Again, when we move past our limitations by accepting them and remaining teachable, to keep learning and understanding that being teachable is an honor, not a restriction. That's what opens up the imagination to create into reality, right? 38. When was the last time you basked in the sun and allowed yourself to daydream, to become what might be and who you might become? Lizard Spirit appears when you are called to let your imagination flow and dream something new. Inspiration is available to you now if you are willing to slow down and let your eyes close a little, allowing ideas to dance in your head. What might come into being if you were to pursue your dream? How might you grow and expand if you allowed yourself to dare to believe in the impossible, making it possible first in your dreaming mind and then in the world as you co-create with spirit? Give in to the power of imagination, and soon your dream will become clearer. The steps will reveal themselves, and what was ephemeral will begin to coalesce into form. Dream it and be it. Spirit asks you to dare to dream. I mean, that's bigger picture inspiration for you there, right? But something to sit within yourself and sort of try to understand better. We can all use a better embrace of our imagination, because that, if we want to change something, is exactly how we do it. You know, we imagine the change first, and then we manifest it, which is exactly what our Sacred Destiny Oracle cards tell us, which I don't even think I'm going to read these cards now that I'm thinking about it, because they speak for themselves based on what we were just saying. Change and embracing. Embracing change, or change embracing. In other words, change what you embrace, or embrace what you change, or what changes, right? Again, a simple play on words, but one that can radically alter the way that you approach anything in your life, right? So, and the consequences of that would be very real. Are you coming up here? Oh God. Well, please just come up if you're coming up. You probably can't see him. Come on. What are you doing, mister? You want to make your weekly appearance that you haven't been doing lately? Anyway, moving on. Oh, here he is. Enzo got very big. Where would you like to sit? Is this the right place? I don't think so. Okay, we don't want to see your butt. Thank you. There we go. What? Okay. So, our overall energy, we have the Ace of Swords. The Ace of Swords, that moment of truth, the truth bomb, perhaps even would be the correct way of putting it, that comes as a result of a process like Saturn squaring the Sun, where, that energy was so dense and intense and therefore transformative. And how does transformation manifest? Transformation manifests as knowledge. We just talked about that in our oracle cards. So here we have it. We're holding that knowledge, this sort of truth that will enable us to move onto this new path with empowerment and without the limitations of institutional, infrastructural conditioning. It's like a brand new institutionalization of knowledge. And it's a big open vessel waiting to be filled with new experiences and new lessons learned. And then those get processed into new ideas, into creative manifestation, into accolades, into accomplishments, into leveling up, right? Our past energy, interestingly, what's coming to an end? We have the Death card, and I did take these bulk piles that came out. The Death card, the Hanged Man, and the Four of Swords. So this is a strong, excuse me, message expressing the end of a period of respite, of internal process, of in some cases the end of illness. In other words, that if we've been going through a long healing, I shouldn't use the word illness, imbalance, let's say, and that we've been going through this process of healing that imbalance, and in the very recent past we've sort of crossed a barrier into a new empowerment, thus ending the voluntary suspension, and it does come with death, which is a sign of ending. But in this trio of cards, I get this very, very strong sense that death as a concept played a very strong part in this understanding. Again, when we were talking about, Pluto and Saturn have been like ramming the fuck out of us to mature into an understanding that every day is a gift, every day is an opportunity, every day is to be filled with as much what am I trying to say? Embrace of all that is given to us. Every experience, every opportunity, every minute of strife, struggle, chaos, joy, whatever it may be, intensity of any kind, that these are to be fully embraced because of the finite nature of life. And that is what death is a reminder of. It is not a dirty word, it is not a dark concept, it's an inevitability of life, and it's something that all of us face on a daily basis. When we're young, generally we live in complete denial of death, unless we are unfortunately forced to face it in some shape or form. But even there, our maturity level is going to probably limit the way that we relate to that. We're probably not going to relate it back to us. We're going to see it as an external process. When we mature, obviously we start understanding that differently, and that seems to be a strong part of this process, which actually is a big part of the healing, right? Interestingly. Okay, At the center of our reading, which is us in the now, another two cards that I will have to use the, actually, before I move into that, I'm going to use our Osho clarifiers to go into that. So that Death, Hanged Man, Four of Swords trio there was clarified by the Eight of Fire, Eight of Wands traveling card. So see how this correlates to that message. The tiny figure moving on the path through this beautiful landscape is not concerned about the goal. He or she knows that the journey is the goal. The pilgrimage itself is the sacred place. Each step of the path is important in itself. When this card appears in a reading, it indicates a time of movement and change. It may be a physical movement from one place to the next, or an inner movement from one way of being to another. But whatever the case, this card promises that the going will be easy and will bring a sense of adventure and growth. There is no need to struggle or plan too much. The traveling card also reminds us to accept and embrace the new. Just as when we travel to another country with a different culture and environment than the one we are accustomed to. This attitude of openness and acceptance invites new friends and experiences into our lives. Life is a continuity, always and always. There is no final destination it is going towards. Comes to the notion of death, right? Just the pilgrimage, just the journey in itself is life. Not reaching to some point, no goal, just dancing and being in pilgrimage, moving joyously without bothering about any destination. What will you do by getting to a destination? Nobody has asked this because everybody is trying to have some destination in life. But the implications? If you really reach the destination of life, then what? Then you will look very embarrassed, nowhere to go. You have reached to the final destination, and in the journey you have lost everything. You had to lose everything. So stand naked at the final destination. No, so standing naked at the final. I'm really sorry for the lack of context in my reading. So standing naked at the final destination, you will look all around like an idiot. What was the point? You were hurrying so hard, and you were so worried, and this is the outcome. And I would imagine, if my theory and intuition are correct, that you probably do transition out of your body at the end of your life as we know it, and sort of look back on it and be like, oh, I mean, there's probably an all-knowingness looking back where you're like, fuck, right? That's the word that comes to my mind. Pardon my French, but yeah. Fuck. All the things I didn't know, all the things I allowed to get in my way, all the conditioning, all the trauma, all the bullshit, all the, and it's the beauty of life. All of those things make your life unique. That is the, you are your own piece of art. You are your own masterpiece. That is what you offer to the world, whether it's celebrated, seen by millions or hundreds, it doesn't really matter. You are a beautiful stroke in time and space, and it is meant to be filled with as much nuance and as much experience, and every groove, every bump, every whatever on the canvas made by the paint of your life is your life's work. It's what you are. It's just what it is. And sometimes those insights, like these Ace of Swords moments of truth, breakthroughs, they just allow us to move on to maybe a different color, right? Or to shift into giving perspective and dimensionality, So, I hope that made sense. back to our central energy at the present moment of this week. What we are moving, what we are in, and we will move through and out of. The King of Cups is the dominant force, along with the Devil. So, emotional knowledge can also lead to a sense of complacency. Generally, restrictions are built out of knowledge. It's the great irony of everything that we've just talked about. Once you reach an idea of knowledge around something, you can stagnate, you can have that become cemented and part of your draconian life philosophy, or you can understand that emotions are fluid, and therefore being master of your emotions, as the King of Cups is not stoicism, and it's not the eradication of chaos. It is the flow of life. And the Devil, as the clarifier on that from the Botticelli Tarot, is where that flow gets interrupted. And I get a strong sense that the emphasis is on distraction here. What distracts you from your emotional flow? What distracts you from your spirituality? What distracts you from making meditation integral to your life and your daily routine? If you can find the time to work out, if you can find the time to pray, and for 30 seconds before you go to sleep, or if you can find the time to eat 3 meals a day or 5 meals a day, or however you approach that, if you can find the time to watch a TV show or watch YouTube videos, then why can't you find the time to meditate? Why can't you find the time to question your priorities without judgment, but instead with an emphasis on a desire to improve and be more in flow, right? This isn't about addictions. This isn't about codependency. This isn't about indulgence. This is about and I imagine this is part of that Scorpio going into the second decan, and also what the new moon in Scorpio really represents for us as a challenge is, because Scorpio is a water sign, so it is all about our emotions and our subconscious and our uber conscious emotional states. And of course, that can manifest in all of those negative things like addictions and codependency, but that's not really where we're at on our journey. Where we're at is always just bringing it back into the flow of things. And what is the flow of things? Well, we just read about it in the traveling card. It's in the acceptance that the journey is the point. You're meant to have more emotional experiences. You do not graduate from having emotional experiences. If you are isolating yourself or alienating yourself or holding yourself in an ivory tower or, segregating yourself or rejecting someone else, other than if it's about your safety, then you are disturbing the flow. So in some shape or form, that will probably manifest. And our clarifier on those cards was the 9 of Cups, or the 9 of Water in this deck, in reverse, the card being laziness. So the indication being a move away from a type of indulgence, I would imagine. But let's read the message. Just for the sake of it, and let's put it in the context of what a reversal of that message would be. Generally, these cards are not so black and white, so you get kind of both sides of the equation anyway. I'll show it to you in the upright. This gentleman clearly thinks he's got it made. He sits in his big overstuffed chair, wearing his sunglasses, shaded by his umbrella, with his pink slippers and his pina colada in his hand. He doesn't have the energy to get up and do anything because he thinks he's done it all already. Exactly, the emotional inertia that interrupts the flow. He hasn't yet turned to see the mirror cracking around him on his right, a sure sign that the place he thinks he's finally arrived at is about to shatter and dissolve before his very eyes. The message this card brings is that this poolside resort is not your final destination. The journey isn't over yet, and as that white bird flying into the vastness of the sky is trying to show, sorry, I got that wrong, but basically the journey isn't over yet because of, it's being represented by that white bird. Your complacency might have arisen from a real sense of achievement, but now it's time to move on. No matter how fuzzy the slippers, how tasty the pina colada, there are skies upon skies still waiting to be explored. And what this is telling me is that because we're looking at this in a linear sense of being in our present moment, and we got it in the reverse, it's actually an acceptance of the fact that we have put so much pressure on ourselves to face our devil energy, to face our addictions, our codependency, all of our inner workings, that Scorpio season, and the King of Cups being a strong representation of that energy, is about pulling us back into flow, which means actually being more present in our emotional experiences, not limiting ourselves to not limiting ourselves to the sense that inertia or like being still or experiencing things as they come in the present moment without a big plan, without a big picture resolution on the horizon, that's somehow a negative thing. It's actually all of this is just a strong reminder of being present in the moment, because that is where we will find that emotional flow. And obviously the fact that it appears there is a strong indication that we probably haven't been doing that. And in my case, I could certainly relate to that, because it's like there's so much activity been taking place in my life, and so much of my focus and time and energy has been taken by work that while subconsciously obviously I'm allowing flow, and there's always upgrades and new experiences and new perception and perspectives to be gained, at the same time I'm not consciously processing those things. I haven't been in my King of Cups energy. I haven't been in the flow of ownership of my experiences. Because I haven't had time to be, but that's Saturn squaring the Sun energy really did kind of squeeze that out. It was like suddenly became solidified. It's like, oh no, this is who I now am in this chapter of my life, and this is how I am going to assimilate the opportunity to grow into a more mature, a more grounded, a more and subsequently also a more willing to take emotional risks again. Right? Does that make sense? Of course, it's going to depend on your individual circumstances, but I certainly see that where, it's like, in order to do all that inner work, there has to be a certain level of rigidity, and perhaps that also means that we do explore our indulgent side, our shadow self. And that in turn itself can also become a form of laziness and complacency, because we then become too introverted in our perception of our life experience and how that affects us. And I'm going to move on because I could talk about that forever, and I've gotten very psychological this week, and I do want to get this under, to keep this under an hour for you guys. And I appreciate your patience. I hope all of the things I speak of actually are relatable to you. I think that they probably are. This end, now you can hear me procrastinating, because that's really why I'm rambling, because it's like this end is like intense, and it was 4 cards that came out, and I haven't even really properly processed them, but they came out in this order, so let's try to figure out how to make sense of them. The 9 of Wands, a card of burden, overwhelm, countered by the Knight of Swords coming in to cut us out of that inertia, from feeling jaded, from feeling like our experiences are taking perhaps our ability to tap into joyfulness away from us. This Knight carries the Ace of Swords, so is our underlying energy. So that's how I'm interpreting it in that capacity, because we have this new found knowledge, and the Knight of Swords is the conduit for that. And what does he do? He gets us out of this. And of course that makes sense, because in a way that is also what that laziness card represents. That is what that Devil card represents. The subsequent experience of that would be this form of inertia, this form of feeling burdened, of feeling overwhelmed. Yeah, that's all I can say. So, interestingly, then what comes from that is then we move into the Knight of Cups. So that sort of truth cuts us out of the inertia and then moves us into an emotional risk, an emotional openness. Now, of course, depending on the circumstances in your life, that could be romantic, that could also be reconnecting, that could be if you're moving into a new environment or a new role in your life, professionally or socially, that could mean being in that space of being extroverted, more able to embrace social and emotional opportunities that come to you to build new experiences with other people. But also, it can be an emboldening of your way that you embrace and express your own emotions. Perhaps some of that comes down to a certain type of bravery, where before you carried the burden of other people's emotions and you tried to cater to them by adapting yourself a little bit too much, and then in turn you find your sort of truth, and then you have the emotional willpower and the emotional maturity and drive to then go out with your heart to be a vessel of expression for those things, to fight against those limitations, to forge your way or to temper your way into a broader emotional spectrum. And whatever it is in your circumstances, it pays off because it leads to the sun, which is the ultimate celebration of life. Here, the sun transcends Saturn. Sorry, Saturn, I mean no disrespect in that, but when we move into that spiritual and emotional harmony, that then in turn becomes bliss. It's when we find that everything that is in our life is something that we can find joy in, that we can embrace every aspect of our journey, because it is our human experience to be obliged find joy, empathy, compassion, and transcendence in every aspect of our journey. I don't know if I'm repeating myself or not. Our outcome from Osho, the beautiful flowering card, which I believe is the Queen of Pentacles. For some reason, I can never retain that. But yes, it is the Queen of Pentacles, so I guess I can retain it, but I always have doubts, is what I'm trying to say. And when my brain is slightly foggy, I have even more doubts. See, it's like I can't enunciate, I can't, it's like I had a stroke. I didn't, but, you know, being very tired will make you feel that way. And my eyes look fucked up because I had a lot of eye makeup on last night from like a Halloween costume. And it's really hard to get eyeliner off when it's been done so densely. Anyway, I digress. Just to push this over like the 1 hour part. I can't blah blah blah. Okay, I'm just gonna read this because I feel like the Queen of Pentacles wants to just speak for herself. The Queen of Rainbows is like a fantastic plant that has reached the apex of its flowering and its colors. She is very sexual, very alive, and full of possibilities. She snaps her fingers to the music of love, and her zodiac necklace is placed in a way that Venus lies over her heart. The sleeves of her garment contain an abundance of seeds, and as the wind blows, the seeds will scatter and take root where they may. She is not concerned whether they land on the soil or on the rocks. She's just spreading them everywhere in sheer celebration of life and love. So that is exactly what we were just talking about, being in flow, right? Flowers fall on her from above in harmony with her own flowering, and the waters of emotion swirl playfully beneath the flower on which she sits. You might feel like a garden of flowers right now, showered with blessings from everywhere. Welcome the bees, invite the birds to drink your nectar, spread your joy around for all to share. Zen wants you living in abundance, living in totality, living intensely, not at the minimum as Christianity wants you, but at maximum, overflowing. Your life should reach to others. Your blissfulness, your benediction, your ecstasy should not be contained within you like a seed. It should open like a flower and spread its fragrance to all and sundry, not only to the friends, but to the strangers too. This is real compassion. This is real love. Sharing your enlightenment, sharing your dance of the beyond. Wow, that sums up everything, that entire journey. So I'm really glad that we made it through that Saturn squaring the Sun energy, because it was intense as all fuck. And it sounds like this week we shall figure out our way of moving into integration of all of those lessons, and it's going to pay off as great beauty. On that note, I wish you a blessed week. I hope that you will take care of yourself and not end up like me, looking like I feel like I look like a scarecrow right now looking at myself. Anyway, I love you very much. I wish you a fantastic week to come. May there be lots of self-love. May you embrace limitations as opportunities to grow and change, and remember to dream the world into being. You can do that by being the King of Cups. Yeah, peace out.